Welcome back. President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa and Tanzania will always seek to build a peaceful Africa in the world. He hosted his Tanzanian counterpart, President Samia Suluhu Hassan, for the state visit in Pretoria. The two nations have contributed troops in the northern parts of Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, and the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo in an attempt to stabilize the situation. Kgomoeswana Kgomoeswana has more on that.
As the global balance of forces are shifting rapidly, the world is moving from unipolar setting to multipolar world. President Cyril Ramaphosa says this should be welcomed as dominant nations used to have an upper hand on other nations, and new countries are emerging as forces to be reckoned with.
We now have more countries advocating for a restructuring also of the multilateral system. As we speak now, some parts of the world are not represented in the global architecture of the world, particularly the United Nations, the Security Council. And we as Africa have been advocating that we cannot have a situation where we've got some 1.3 billion people on the African continent who are not represented, whose voices are not heard.
Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is in South Africa for the state visit, also echoed the sentiments. She spoke about her engagement with the opposition in the East African nation. This is aimed at bearing the hardships with other political players.
Tanzania has always been peaceful and stable. However, there was a situation that opposition parties acted or were looked into as enemies. So that's what I wanted to remove. So I came up with the concept of 4 R's: the reconciliation, resilience, reforms and rebuilding, whereby my party decided to sit down with other political parties and hear from them, have a dialogue and hear from them. What are the disturbing factors in our political administration?
As South Africa gears up to host the Brics summits later this year, President Ramaphosa has extended an invite to President Suluhu Hassan.
We want the Brics summit to focus on Africa and Africa's development. And that is the theme that we have crafted for the Brics summit. We will want to see a number of our sister countries on the continent coming so that as the Brics summit members hold their meeting, we're also able to extend and hold another meeting with them so that Brics can focus on Africa.
I'm glad to say that I've been invited to attend the coming Brics meeting here. So when I attend the meeting, that's when I'll come up with how Tanzania will participate in Brics.
Pretoria also used the occasion to call for a diplomatic solution on Russia-Ukraine conflict.
We remain committed to a peaceful resolution of the conflict, and we also welcome the initiatives that are being made by others, including China, our co-Brics member, who have come up with a 12-point plan solution to bringing the conflict to an end. And we continue as a number of African countries to insist on the conflict being resolved through negotiations.
And the current skirmishes in the eastern DRC remain a cause for concern for South Africa and Tanzania.
We recently discussed it at the AU summit, and as South Africa we chaired the Peace and Security meeting. And there was an agreement that was reached there, that there should be a cessation of hostilities, and all forces, be it M23, ADF, and all the others, should immediately desist from whatever military operations that they were involved in, and the East African force should move in and stabilize the situation.
President Samia Suluhu Hassan has also expressed their appreciation after she has been conferred with one of the highest orders from Pretoria. The two leaders have committed to work together in many areas to deepen cooperation. Kgomoeswana, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Victor Kgomoeswana from the University of Limpopo joins us now to share some thoughts about this. A very good evening to you, Victor. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's just first start with the current strength and depth of business relations between the two countries. Where would you put it?
Good evening, Tsepiso. Good to talk to you again. The essence of Tanzania is that it is a member of both SADC, the Southern African Development Community, which South Africa is a key member, and also the East African Community. Okay, now the DRC is also a dual member of the two. But for a very long time, Tanzania was that buffer between East African Community and the Southern African Development Community. The other importance is, of course, there are businesses, South African companies. Vodacom is a big player in Tanzania, and so are the many other businesses. But the real essence of it is the political economic location of it, because it shares a border with Mozambique. And if you look at the content of the discussion of the two heads of state, you would have realized that defense cooperation is a very important element of that. Now, the business of defense and war is very important in the business of trade, regular trade as we know it. So it is more the location of Tanzania that makes it significant, because this intra-Africa trade that we talk about in this African continental free trade area requires that key economies in the different regional economic blocks should work together. And I think it is because of the border that Tanzania shares with Mozambique, and the fact that the Cabo Delgado instability threatens to spill over into the East African community, that Tanzania had to deepen the relationship with South Africa. So it's the business of business, yes, as in investment, but it's also the business of peace and security in the region that makes this meeting so significant.
Victor, we'll come back to the AFCFTA and the unique opportunities that are out there for the two countries. But I want to follow up on the train of thought that you've just introduced in terms of the political and economic. Now, given the liberation struggle history of South Africa and its relations with Tanzania, do they have the same developmental ethos, and would they then pursue their economic agenda in the same way?
No. Tanzania is one of the, if I may say, the most united countries Africa will ever know. By that, I mean, you know, when you're in South Africa, you are likely to run into people say, I'm Tswana, I'm Zulu, I'm this. One thing that Julius Mwalimu Nyerere left as a legacy for the country, the people of Tanzania, was that he taught them that you might be Mzanaki, you might be Mjaluo, you might be this or that, but you are Tanzanian. He has forged national unity in that country as I've never seen it anywhere on the African continent. That's the difference. And by the way, Chama Pinduzi, the ruling party, you can say, has been ruling that country since independence, although it wasn't exactly in the same form. But it has been ruling the country, and it was on the same plateau, or no, trajectory, as in it was winning, but by a diminishing minority, just like the ANC is doing. But the difference between them and the ANC is that they, when they realized they were going to lose the majority, went out and found Mr. Clean to make sure that they arrest that slide in the support they were enjoying. And that was the late John Magufuli, the one who was running the country before he died in 2021, and the current president took over. So no, we are very different. It's a stable country, Tanzania. It is one of the most peaceful countries. The people of Tanzania are the most genteel and quite, if you like, debonair. They are not like us. They are not as aggressive. In fact, They will never, no, we are very different. Although we have a lot in common business-wise, they are a gold mining economy just as we are. They have coal as we are. They are coastal, and they have a lot of other things that we have in common. But no, we are very different as countries, both politically and socially.
President Cyril Ramaphosa pointing to the heartening fact of the completion of the AfCFTA, but we know that there have been some major stickler points, particularly between the countries now. Just looking at that, the economic ideology, but we know that the private sector may be a whole different animal altogether. But when South Africa says to Tanzania, come and invest in South Africa, as we have done, he mentioned that there are already 208 South African businesses there, 21,000 people employed through investments there. What are they signing up for, the Tanzanians? What are we using as a carrot stick to say, this is why you ought to invest in South Africa, this is what you get out of it, particularly based on the promises of the AfCFTA?
As far as I know, there are agricultural products that Tanzania gets, South Africa gets from Tanzania. If I'm not mistaken, pineapples is one of the major crops that are produced there that get exported all over the world. The other major thing that South Africa consumes is cashew nuts. And as I'm saying, the trade direction statistics, I will be dishonest if I try to share the details with you. But the essence of it is that it's an agricultural economy. They have a policy called Kilimo Kwanza. Maybe because African Continental Free Trade Area requires a strong agricultural leaning, there might be room for collaboration there. But our climates are not the same. They're a tropical country. We are subtropical in the main. So I do not know. Look, I listened to the President Ramaphosa, that is talking about fellow or sister African countries coming to be part of a BRICS summit. Maybe that's part of the lobbying that is beginning to happen, because the BRICS summit with South Africa chairing is going to require that South Africa, as the only African country in the BRICS bloc, should have more support and more legitimacy from the African continent. And it can only do that by starting to talk to the African countries before the summit happens. I hope that President Ramaphosa is not going to just hope that these countries will come on the day of the summit and talk, that there'll be a lot more discussion and horse trading before the summit happens, so that when South Africa goes to the BRICS summit, it does so with the weight of the African continent behind it. Tanzania is a major economy, but I would hope he will use that to get the whole East African community behind this, which will give him about over 200 million people. But I also believe and trust that he will go to countries like Tanzania, Nigeria and Egypt, so that he balances that representation of the entire African continent when he speaks at the BRICS summit. I trust that it won't be just a meeting where he invites other African countries to tag along.
From the University of Limpopo and also author of the book Africa's Open for Business, Victor Kgomoeswana, thank you so much for your time and insights. And of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa saying earlier on that the two countries are committed to the principles of Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and also speaking about the importance of Swahili as a language of use, which he spoke about a pilot project that South Africa is supporting.